TypeScript 5.8 was released, and I took that release as an opportunity to completely update my TypeScript course. And by the way, if you're a student of that course on Udemy or Academy Pro, you got the update for free, and you should check your mails and the course announcements for all the details. If you're not part of that course yet, now's the best time to join and learn all about TypeScript from the basics all the way up to advanced concepts, decorators, generic types, and so on. But in this video here, I actually want to explore why exactly TypeScript version 5.8 is interesting, and I specifically want to explore one way of using TypeScript that many of you probably haven't used yet. Now, it's worth noting that TypeScript 5.8, if you read the official announcement of that version, it's not actually that groundbreaking. It doesn't introduce any huge breaking changes or dramatic new features. It mostly improves a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Better type inference in certain situations, for example, support of the require function in ES modules if using module node next. So things you might invisibly take advantage of, so to say. But it's this change here that's the interesting thing about TypeScript 5.8. It's a new option, a new setting you can set in your tsconfig.json file. And it is a setting that's very important if you're building a Node.js TypeScript application. So if you're building a Node.js application with TypeScript, which you could of course always do, right? I also show it in my TypeScript course, also in this fully updated new version. I've re-recorded the entire Node TypeScript section there as well, but you were always able to build Node.js applications with TypeScript. You could simply write your TypeScript code, compile it to JavaScript, and then run that with Node.js. However, and that's the part you might have missed, Node.js actually has native TypeScript support built in. At least it has that since version 22.6. So if you're using Node.js version 22.6 or higher, Node.js is actually able to run your TypeScript code without compilation. And that's of course huge. It means you no longer need packages like TS Node to run your Node.js code without a compilation step, or use alternative runtimes like Bun or Dino instead of Node.js. You can still do that. You might be interested in other features or performance advantages those runtimes may give you, but you no longer need to use these alternatives if you're building a Node.js TypeScript application and you want to run it without compilation, because that is natively supported by Node.js since version 22.6. So for example, here I have a Node.js TypeScript application. Actually, that's an application we built in this updated TypeScript course. And I can now use Node and try running it. That should work because here I'm actually using Node version 23.7, so it should support running TypeScript code. Nonetheless, what you might get when you try this the first time is an error, because you actually need to change or adjust a couple of things about your Node TypeScript project in order to make it runnable with just Node.js. And that's also where TypeScript 5.8 will become important again, but I'll get back to this. So what you need to change is you essentially need to make 3 adjustments. For one, whenever you're importing a type or an interface, so something that does not exist in vanilla JavaScript, you need to add this type annotation in front of that imported thing. And that's simply a way of telling Node.js or some build tool you might be using that something you're importing is a TypeScript only feature, you could say, that it's a type declaration. In this case, for example, I'm importing an interface, and that only exists in TypeScript. This type annotation can therefore be added, and it should be added if you plan on running this code with Node.js and its native built-in TypeScript support. So that's one adjustment. The second important adjustment is that you should change all your imports and not import from .js files, as you need to do it if you plan to compile your TypeScript code to JavaScript and then run it with Node. If you don't plan to do that, you should import from .ts. You might get an error, as you see here, but I'll fix that soon. So that's also something you should do in all your TypeScript files. And the third important thing, the third adjustment you should make to your code is you should ensure that you're avoiding things like enums or namespaces. And I'll get back to why that's important in a second. Now, in order to get rid of these errors here, and also in order to force me to add this type annotation in front of all these TypeScript only imports, you can and should tweak your tsconfig.json file. You should set the allow importing TS extension setting to true, and also add no emit and set this to true. These two typically work together to allow yourself to import .ts files. And you should set this verbatim module syntax setting here to true. That will force you to add this type keyword. So now if I save everything, for example, I get an error if I don't have that type keyword. If I add it, the error goes away and importing .ts files is allowed. Now with all these adjustments made, if I now try to run my application, it runs just fine because I'm using that built-in Node.js TypeScript support. Now, why did I have to get rid of that enum? And what if I need it in my TypeScript application? Well, I had to get rid of it here because by default, Node.js has a strip-only mode or a strip-only way of supporting TypeScript, which means it simply strips, it simply drops all the TypeScript features from your code. It converts your TypeScript code to JavaScript code by simply ignoring all the TypeScript specific parts. For example, in app.ts, I have this middleware function down here. And here, of course, I have a bunch of type annotations. I'm setting the types of all these parameters. That's, of course, all TypeScript. Now, in order to turn this into JavaScript and treat it as JavaScript, all that needs to be done is in the end get rid of these annotations, right? And that's exactly what Node.js does when you use it to run TypeScript code. It simply strips all these TypeScript features. It simply ignores all the TypeScript specific syntax, you could say, to get to JavaScript code. It's not, and that's important, it's not compiling your TypeScript code to JavaScript behind the scenes. It just ignores the TypeScript parts. And it does so for performance reasons, essentially, because compiling, of course, takes some time. Ignoring is faster. Now, features like enums, however, can't be ignored, because an enum, if you take a look at the compiled version of that code, is represented in JavaScript code like this. It's there in JavaScript code. It's not hidden. It's not compiled away. Compare that to the JavaScript version of this use middleware function. This middleware function with all the type annotations here in JavaScript, it looks like this. So it's the same, just without the type annotations. So that shows us that here it's enough to just ignore the TypeScript stuff. With the to-do.ts file and the enum, that is not the case. Here, this JavaScript code needs to be produced in order to make it work. And therefore, ignoring is no longer enough, and that's why you can't use features like enum when using that strip-only Node.js TypeScript support. So therefore, instead of using an enum, you should, for example, use a string literal union type to represent multiple predefined values you want to enforce in your code. And that's where TypeScript 5.8 and this new option now becomes important. Because TypeScript 5.8 adds this erasable syntax only option, which you can set to true. And if you do set this option, if you do set it to true, then this will ensure that you actually get a warning and an error in your IDE already when using features like enum that can't just be ignored. Now, at the point of time where I'm recording this, this feature is so new that my IDE, VS Code here, does not yet display any warnings or errors, but that will of course change. And that's why TypeScript 5.8 is a pretty important release if you are interested in writing Node TypeScript applications, because it gives you this new setting which helps you ensure that you're not accidentally using certain features in your Node.js code that can't just be ignored and that therefore won't be runnable with just Node.js and its built-in TypeScript support. Though, for completeness sake, I also want to mention that Node.js also has a built-in transformation mode instead of that strip mode, which is the default, at least at the point of time where I'm recording this. So if you do want to use features like enums in your Node.js code, right now that won't work with the Node.js version I'm using because that uses this strip mode as a default. But if you absolutely need those features, if you don't want to replace them with anything else, then you can actually add the --experimental-transform-types flag to your node command and then run your TypeScript code with it, and then it will just work. Because with this flag added here, your TypeScript code will actually be compiled to JavaScript before it's executed. So with this flag added, you can use all the TypeScript features, but of course at a performance cost. That is the downside, and that is why you still might not want to use features like this, and why you might want to take advantage of this new option that's offered by TypeScript 5.8. And that's why TypeScript 5.8 is pretty interesting, why running Node.js TypeScript applications has become easier than ever before, and why TypeScript might be a great choice for your next Node.js application, and why you might want to consider getting my fully updated TypeScript course to learn not just about features like this, but about all the core features you should know about when working with TypeScript.